Good morning and welcome to this Thursday Thought, which I'm doing on Saturday, December the 20th, because next Thursday is Christmas Day. Well, a couple of days ago at work here, I was in my office when I heard Linda, our office manager, go to the office door and she let somebody in. She visited with that guest for just a moment and I overheard part of that conversation. The woman was there with her mother and she was asking if we had any food. Well, Linda said something to the effect that we don't usually keep that kind of food here, but we did have some snack type food that we normally place into the blessing box outside. Well, when I heard what the conversation was all about, I went out to the waiting area where it took place to find a woman in her 40s along with an older lady. Linda went back to the food storage area to prepare a sack of that snack type food for them. And in the waiting area, then, I began a conversation with the younger woman as she was the one who had been speaking with Linda. Now, I usually begin these kinds of conversations. I've done this many times before, and I usually begin these kinds of conversations by just asking what was going on with them or how their day was going, in a nice way, of course. Well, the younger woman began telling me a little about their situation. Her face was calm and collected, and she seemed to display a sign of strength. But I looked and saw her left hand on the arm of the chair where she was sitting. Her hand was shaking, tremoring. That told me that she was barely holding it together as she was speaking to me. So I asked them both to come back into the office and we'd visit a little more there. Well, they came back into the office and we visited while Linda finished filling a sack. We ended up conversing for well over 30 minutes as I gently pulled more and more of their story out of them. Their story was one that I've heard many tens of times before. An abusive situation, boyfriend is a knothead, they had to get out of a domestic situation, they have no place to go, they've never had to access social services or anything like that in the past. They didn't seemingly have much of an idea on what to do or where to go. Mom had transportation, which is why she was there and was helping her daughter as best she could. Both of them are couch surfing right now. Well, there wasn't much we could really do here. We gave them a sack or two of food. I happened to have a couple of one-day bus passes that I gave them. I also gave them contact information for a couple of my social services friends who might be able to help. I gave them a list of services that are available in Wichita that the homeless outreach team gives to the homeless that they encounter. And I told her mother that when her gas tank got more empty to contact me and we'd fill her tank. And I happened to have just a little cash on hand for needs just like this, and I gave the younger woman $20. But most of all, and mostly, I just listened. The ladies talked for at least 90% of the time that we were conversing. All I was doing was just asking questions and getting some clarification on things. As we conversed, the stress level began to fall. The facade of strength that I saw in the first couple of minutes in the waiting area, that was no longer visible. And when I gave her the cash and told her that I didn't care what she did with it, she totally lost it. She couldn't talk for a good minute or so. And that reaction is not at all unusual when I give a little cash to someone. And when I once asked one of my social worker friends why these people tended to become so emotional when handed just a few dollars, she responded that it was because I trusted them with something of value to do with as they chose, not as I chose. Well, I have to admit that I hadn't thought of it that way, but I can appreciate that. Oh, by the way, we don't just give out cash left and right. In fact, we seldom do so. It has to be a special need of some kind or someone that I know well. And we don't always have cash to give. We have guidelines and we have limits in place. But sometimes a little cash can go a long way to help meet a need. Well, We parted ways a couple of minutes after that. I don't know where they were going, nor do I know where they spent the night that night or what's happening to them right now. We may never see them again. I think about these kinds of encounters for several days following, wondering just where they went and were they safe, whether they contacted the social service contacts I gave them or were able to find other services. 99% of the time, I never hear from them again. Now, this may be an exception. If the mom contacts me when her gas tank empties, I may be able to have some of my questions answered then. But I'm not counting on it. They may decide to find another town or city to live in due to the abusive situation that they had here. I don't know. This is not, I repeat, this is not an unusual occurrence at our church. Not at all. It's usually women who come in. It's usually an abusive situation of some kind. Often it's generational in nature, but not always. A decent share of the time, it's a first-timer or a newbie, so to speak, that comes to our door, basically lost in the maze of social service agencies, invisible to much of society, lonely, and afraid. Afraid for their own safety, afraid of what that night or the next day has in store, afraid of having lost what little control that they've had over their lives. Those of us with a secure safety net of family, friends, and resources, we don't have a clue of the stress, the disappointment, and the despair that these people live with every waking moment. The least we can do is display some kind of compassion and empathy. Well, thanks for listening to me as I sometimes need a listening ear as well as those who come to the office door. This holiday season, check up on your listening skills. How are your compassion and empathy assets doing right now? Have you had the opportunity to give in some way recently? Did you act positively on that opportunity? May God's blessing be upon us all this season as we learn what it means to love our neighbor. Blessings.